October 2007, Port of Manzanillo, Mexico. Customs inspectors crack open shipping container number TCLU 44789293. Inside, 23.5 tons of cocaine. Street value, $500 million. Within 48 hours, the Colombian suppliers issue an ultimatum to the Sinaloa cartel. Pay us $50 million, or we'll kill everyone you love. The clock is ticking. And somewhere in Mexico City, men in government offices are making a very different calculation. This is the story of how Mexico's most powerful cartels faced their greatest loss and transformed it into one of the most sophisticated corruption operations ever documented in a U.S. federal courtroom. The cocaine didn't belong to just one organization. By late 2007, the landscape of Mexican drug trafficking was undergoing a violent fracture. The Sinaloa cartel, led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, had dominated the cocaine trade for years, but internal tensions were tearing the organization apart. The Beltran Leyva brothers, Arturo, Alfredo, Hector, and Carlos, had been key partners in the Sinaloa Federation, responsible for logistics, bribery, and enforcement. That partnership was collapsing. The 23.5 tons seized at Manzanillo represented a joint operation, a last major shipment before the two organizations would go to war. The man who would later testify about what happened next stood 6'5". They called him El Grande, the Big One. Sergio Villarreal Barragan had been a Mexican federal police officer before crossing into the criminal underworld. By 2007, he was second in command of the Beltran Leyva organization, responsible for Sicario training, enforcement operations, and critically, maintaining relationships with corrupt officials. El Grande understood something fundamental about the drug trade. Violence is expensive, but information is priceless. When the Colombians demanded $50 million, they weren't negotiating. In the cocaine supply chain, Mexican cartels operate on consignment. The Colombians front the product. The Mexicans transport it across the border, sell it in the United States, and then pay the Colombians their share. It's a credit system built on trust, enforced by fear. When 23.5 tons disappear into government custody, the Colombians don't care about excuses. They don't care about DEA intelligence or bad luck or corrupt officials who didn't come through. They care about their money. And if they don't get money, they take lives. Not just the lives of the people responsible, but their families, their associates, anyone connected to the failure. El Grande later testified that the pressure was immediate and existential. The cartel didn't have $50 million in liquid cash sitting in a vault. That money was tied up in operations, in bribes, in the next shipment. Paying the Colombians would cripple the organization, but not paying them would result in a bloodbath that would make the ongoing cartel war look restrained. So they needed another option. 2. Understand why Manzanillo mattered and why this seizure created such catastrophic consequences. You need to understand the geography of cocaine. The drug doesn't materialize in Mexico. It's grown in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, processed in clandestine labs in the jungle, then transported north. The primary route runs through Ecuador, where the cocaine is loaded onto commercial shipping vessels hidden among legitimate cargo: electronics, textiles, fruit. Those ships sail north to Mexico's Pacific coast, and the largest, most strategically important port on that coast is Manzanillo. Manzanillo isn't just big, it's the gateway. Nearly half of all containerized cargo entering Mexico from Asia and South America passes through this single port. In 2007, that meant roughly 1.5 million containers annually. Inspecting every container is logistically impossible. Customs officials rely on intelligence, pattern recognition, and randomized checks. For cartels, this creates both opportunity and vulnerability. If your container gets flagged, if someone in the chain talks, if the DEA has been tracking the shipment from Colombia, you lose everything. And in October 2007, that's exactly what happened. The intelligence came from the United States Drug Enforcement Administration. They'd been monitoring communications, tracking financial flows, coordinating with Colombian authorities. When container TCLU 44789293 arrived at Manzanillo, the DEA had already flagged it. They notified Mexican authorities. And here's where the story gets complicated, because the Mexican government in 2007 was not a monolithic entity working toward a single goal. It was a fractured ecosystem where different agencies pursued different agendas, and where cartel money flowed through the highest levels of power. The man in charge of Mexico's entire security apparatus was Genaro Garcia Luna. He served as Secretary of Public Security from 2006 to 2012 under President Felipe Calderón. His official role was to coordinate federal police, oversee organized crime investigations, and dismantle the cartels. His actual role, as later proven in a Brooklyn federal courtroom in February 2023, was to accept millions of dollars in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel and actively protect their operations while targeting their rivals. Garcia Luna didn't work alone. He commanded a network of corrupted officials embedded throughout Mexico's security infrastructure: federal police commanders, intelligence analysts, prosecutors. When the Sinaloa Beltran-Leyva organizations needed something from the government, they went through this network. And when 23.5 tons of cocaine got seized at Manzanillo, they went to Garcia Luna. According to testimony from Oscar Nava-Valencia, a cartel operative known as El Lobo, or the Wolf, the cartel paid Garcia Luna between $5 and $10 million for one specific task: get the cocaine back. Think about the audacity of that request. This wasn't a small-time seizure at a highway checkpoint where a corrupt local cop might look the other way. This was the largest cocaine bust in Mexican history, involving the DEA, Mexican Marines, and international attention. The cocaine was sitting in a secured government warehouse under military guard. Surveillance, documentation, chain of custody. This was supposed to be untouchable, but El Lobo testified that the payment was made. The cartel believed, or desperately hoped, that if anyone could engineer the impossible, it was Garcia Luna. It didn't work. The problem was simple: too many eyes. The DEA had been involved from the beginning. The Mexican Marines, one of the few institutions in Mexico still considered relatively uncorrupted, were providing security. There were photographs, inventory logs, witness statements. Even with Garcia Luna's influence, there was no plausible way to make 23.5 tons of cocaine simply vanish from custody without triggering an international scandal that would bring down everyone involved. So the cartel faced a choice. They couldn't pay the Colombians, they couldn't recover the cocaine, and the deadline was approaching. That's when someone, El Grande, would later testify it was a collective decision among leadership, proposed something unprecedented. If we can't get the real cocaine back, what if we make fake cocaine? The logic was both desperate and ingenious. The cocaine was sitting in a warehouse, theoretically under government control. If the cartel could manufacture convincing replicas, bricks that looked identical, weighed the same, even smelled similar, maybe they could swap them. Corrupt officials could facilitate access. The fake bricks would replace the real bricks, and by the time anyone discovered the switch, the organization would have recouped its loss. But creating convincing fake cocaine isn't simple. Real cocaine bricks are hydraulically compressed blocks wrapped in plastic, often heat-sealed, sometimes stamped with logos or symbols indicating their origin. They have a specific weight, typically 1 kilogram per brick. They have a distinctive chemical smell, and they have a glossy, slightly oily surface from the compaction process. According to El Grande's testimony, the Beltran-Leyva organization built a clandestine factory on a ranch normally used for training sicarios. This wasn't a drug lab. It was something stranger: a prop workshop designed to manufacture fake drugs. They brought in a hydraulic press, the same type used to compress legitimate cocaine. They set up an iron workstation to create molds. They sourced bags of sugar and flour as the base material. And critically, they acquired barrels of ether and acetone, volatile chemicals that, when applied to the surface of the fake bricks, would mimic the smell and glossy finish of real cocaine. The operation required precision. The bricks had to be the exact weight. The packaging had to be identical. The smell had to be convincing enough that even experienced traffickers or corrupt officials handling the swap wouldn't immediately recognize them as fake. El Grande testified that the factory was operational, the fake bricks were produced, and the plan moved forward. But there's a critical gap in the historical record here. What actually happened next remains disputed. Some testimony suggests the fake bricks were transported to the warehouse. Other accounts claim the operation was called off when it became clear that even with Garcia Luna's network, physical access to the secured facility was impossible. What's confirmed is this: the fake cocaine factory existed. The cartel invested significant resources into creating these replicas, and somewhere in that process, the plan evolved. Because the cartel realized something crucial: they didn't actually need to recover the cocaine. They needed to recover their credibility with the Colombians. The debt wasn't really about the drugs, it was about responsibility. If the cartel could prove to the Colombian suppliers that the seizure wasn't due to incompetence or betrayal on their end, if they could demonstrate that they'd been compromised by forces beyond their control, maybe the debt could be forgiven. That's where Garcia Luna became valuable in a different way. He provided them with something more useful than the cocaine itself: information. According to El Grande's testimony, Garcia Luna gave the cartel a copy of the DEA intelligence document that had led to the Manzanillo seizure. This wasn't a minor leak. It was a classified U.S. law enforcement report detailing how American agents had tracked the shipment, identified the container, and coordinated with Mexican authorities. The cartel took this document to their Colombian suppliers and made a simple argument. Look, we didn't fail. We didn't talk. We didn't get sloppy. The Americans had intelligence we couldn't have anticipated. This was beyond our control. And it worked. The Colombians, seeing documented proof that the seizure resulted from DEA surveillance rather than cartel incompetence, forgave the $50 million debt. The cocaine was gone. The money was never recovered. But the relationship, the credit system that allowed future shipments to continue, remained intact. This is the part of the story that reveals the true nature of cartel power. It's not just about violence or logistics. It's about access to information. It's about having officials at the highest levels of government who can provide intelligence, manipulate investigations, and turn law enforcement victories into strategic advantages. The fake cocaine factory was real. Whether the bricks were ever used remains unclear. But the intelligence document, that was the actual currency that saved the organization. Genaro Garcia Luna continued serving as Mexico's Secretary of Public Security until 2012. He oversaw the arrest and extradition of numerous cartel leaders. He gave speeches about the drug war. He met with U.S. officials, and according to trial testimony from multiple cartel operatives, he received millions of dollars in bribes, coordinated protection for cartel shipments, and leaked sensitive intelligence that resulted in the deaths of rival traffickers and Mexican law enforcement officers who weren't on the payroll. He was arrested in December 2019 in Texas. His trial in Brooklyn Federal Court concluded in February 2023 with convictions on multiple counts of drug trafficking conspiracy and making false statements. Prosecutors presented evidence that Garcia Luna had received between $20 and $75 million in bribes over his career. Testimony came from cartel insiders like El Grande, who described in detail how the corruption system operated. The Manzanillo cocaine was destroyed, incinerated according to protocol. The fake cocaine factory was dismantled. The $50 million debt evaporated into the same shadowy financial networks that make the drug trade possible. And the system continued exactly as before. Because here's the uncomfortable truth this story reveals. The drug war isn't failing. It's functioning exactly as designed, not as a mechanism to stop drug trafficking, but as a parallel economy where seizures generate headlines, arrests provide political capital, and the underlying machinery of corruption and supply continues uninterrupted. The Manzanillo bust was historic. It was celebrated as a major victory, and within weeks, the cartels had processed their loss not as a catastrophic failure, but as a solvable logistics problem requiring bribery, deception, and intelligence manipulation. El Grande is currently serving a prison sentence in the United States after cooperating with authorities. Garcia Luna will likely spend the rest of his life in an American prison. The Beltran Leyva organization fractured after Arturo Beltran Leyva was killed in a 2009 shootout with Mexican Marines. The Sinaloa cartel continues operating under new leadership after El Chapo's extradition and conviction, and cocaine still flows through Manzanillo. The port still processes 1.5 million containers annually. Customs officials still make seizures, some large, many small. And somewhere in that vast machinery of global trade and global crime, the calculation continues. How much does it cost to move a ton of cocaine from Colombia to the United States? And how much does it cost to make sure the right people look the other way? The answer, as this story demonstrates, isn't just measured in money. It's measured in information, in relationships, in the carefully maintained fiction that the institutions designed to stop the drug trade aren't, in fact, integral to its operation. When your country's top security official is simultaneously on the cartel payroll, who's really in charge? When a $50 million debt can be erased with a leaked intelligence document, what does that say about the actual value system governing this war? And when building a factory to manufacture fake cocaine is considered a reasonable business solution, what does that reveal about how normalized corruption has become in this economy of violence? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're the operational reality of the drug trade, a reality where the biggest seizure in Mexican history became, for the cartels, just another problem requiring the same solutions they always use: money, deception, and officials who've decided the drug war is more profitable when nobody actually wins. Share your thoughts below.